You're listening to Parasearch Radio, news, views and reviews from the world of the paranormal from across the UK and beyond. Find us on Facebook, Twitter and the World Wide Web. The views and opinions expressed by presenters and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Parasearch Radio or their affiliates and sponsors. Listener discretion is advised.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We're back. Obviously, last week we were ill because we were still getting over the Sage Paracon lurgy. It's me, Sam. You know, we should all know me by now. We've nearly been on the network. Carl's still ill fighting and virus, but hopefully he will be back next week or whenever. And I am joined by this lady who I should have met in Vegas in October, but due to flights, I was unable to. And that is Vanessa from Las Vegas Oddities.
Hey.
Hey, how are you?
I'm doing all right. A little stressed out, but that's kind of small business ownership.
Like I said, we should have met, shouldn't we? No one really knows this, but me and Vanessa should have met back in October.
Whoops. Crap happens, right?
Yeah. Maybe it happened for a reason, I don't know. Hopefully it was just a good reason and not a bad reason.
Yeah, you know, it's not the flying monkeys coming for us or something. Anyways.
Although that would probably be cool, I don't know. If anyone's into flying monkey thing.
I guess it depends on the flying monkey. Like, is it a smoking and drinking flying monkey? I'm down for that.
Or aliens.
Yeah, I mean, it's Nevada, so that's very possible. I mean, I'm not too far from Area 51. They actually do an unmarked plane craft from McCarran Airport here in Las Vegas out to that testing site.
Yeah, I think Cole Point.
The people who.
No,
go ahead.
No, carry on.
The people that work there don't live out in the middle of the desert. That's nobody wants to do that.
Mm. Yeah, I think Cole pointed some of the aircrafts out at the McLaren to me from the. Not from the hotel, but every time we drove past there.
Yeah, I know you did the Clown Motel. Did you do the, mailbox or Area 51?
No, we just went to the motel. You know where the motel in...
Yeah, the Clown Motel.
Yeah, no, but we went to the Area 51 thing. What's it called? I don't know what to call it. The truck stop.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
And it's gone straight out of my head now. The next door to it, where you can apparently sleep with aliens.
Oh, okay, cool. The little, the
brothel. It's called brothel. I couldn't think then.
Yeah, no, it's cool. It's Nevada's the only state in the U.S. that has legal prostitution, but it's only in counties under a certain size. So it's actually illegal in Vegas because Clark County is so big. But there's a whole ring of them around the county though, and there is one that's alien themed.
Yeah,
I think Mustang Ranch is probably the most famous one. I don't know if any of those are haunted, though.
I think Mustang Ranches. I know they did a show on. I think it was Kerry and Mark who were on Friday show. On a Friday show, I'm sure they did Stardust Ranch or one of them where cool. Aliens landed. I can't remember. I'm sure Kerry will let me know which one it was. So.
Yeah, and I know Utah has the creepy Skinwalker Ranch.
Yeah, was it I don't know what. It was one or the other. I'm so but anyway, going on from the weirdness, stuff with Nevada a minute, I want to obviously get to know a little bit more about your shop because I was gutted that I wasn't able to visit. Boo. too.
Yeah, I mean, I specialize in the weird, the unusual, the macabre, the occult. There's actually there's a couple of shops similar to it in Great Britain. I know one guy is on. I have forgotten the name of his store. I want to say it's in Stafford.
That's close to me, you know.
And then in London, there's the Last Thursday Society, which is it's like Victor Wynn's Last Thursday Society. It's an oddity store and a pub. Because, why not drink? I think they do high tea too. Which I don't know how common high tea is. Like, are there a lot of places that do that, or is that like kind of a specialized thing?
I don't know, but they've got like, I don't know if it's the same shop or the same cafe we're talking about, but I know a few of my friends went one a few months back, and you can make your own like potion drinks, and some have got alcohol in, and
I wouldn't be surprised if it's those guys. They seem pretty fun. Like, I haven't really interacted with them, but it's like 11 Mayor Street in London. I keep hoping if I refer people, like, someday I'll get to come visit, and they'll be like, here's a free t-shirt, and I'll be like, awesome.
Yeah.
I'm not holding my breath, though. Yeah.
Well, if you ever come over, we'll give you a tour. It's all right.
Sweet. But, yeah, so I kind of started in this, I've always liked weird mourning traditions and funeral rites. I studied art in college. I have a master's of fine art. I'm a big fan of y'all's Francis Bacon, the painter. I've also always kind of been into the occult. So one of my dreams was I wanted Captain Spaulding from House of a Thousand Corpses' gas station, with the the serial killer ride and what's it's inside. And I moved to Las Vegas after my dad died because I didn't want to live in Texas anymore. And there was an existing store. I worked for him for a little while. He got sick. It was really way more antiques than oddities. So I kind of let him keep the antiques and bought out the oddities and started my own thing.
That's a good thing, because obviously you've got a shop now, right, and that you're into it. So I find if you're interested in something, whether you've got a business or you do it as a hobby, you tend to want to do it more, and it gives you the push to do it more when you love it and you have an interest in it.
Yeah, and there's some things that I wasn't as into. Like, I didn't know a ton about bone prices when I first started because that wasn't really something that I collected. I had a bunch of the old hair jewelry. Do you know about that from the Victorian era?
Yeah.
Yeah, so people would take their loved one's hair and make it into mementos. I think it's fairly common to find here. I think it's way more common in Great Britain because, you guys made the Victorian era, right?
Yeah.
It was pretty much defined by your culture. I mean, it's named after your former queen. I also always like the death photos and the memorial placards, and I guess I was more media centric, but that makes sense as an artist, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know that I've ever gotten a haunted photo or anything, though, if you want to talk about the paranormal. I did have a doll that jumped off the shelf at me here in the store a bunch of times. I think it was the resident ghost that's supposed to be here being like, hey, this is valuable, because it turned out to be really valuable. Even if at the time it was driving me crazy that I kept having to pick the stupid thing up.
I bet you were kind of like, not again, will you pack it in?
I know, I was like, what is going on? Why? Then I started researching the thing and was all like, oh, it's a Victorian round-faced doll and it's really valuable. even though it was like in terrible condition, it was worth like $250.
Mm.
Yeah, which I don't know how that converts to pounds.
I've done it.
Yeah, so they think the building's haunted because the former building owner passed away in the bathroom of a heart attack.
Wow.
There has been some weird things like sounds, people being touched. I've had shelves on several occasions like collapse in on each other, and there's these brackets that hold them up, and those don't give way. The shelves just kind of somehow fall in. And I had an employee that tried to sleep in here one night because it was August and their air conditioning had gone out, and that's nasty hot. Like here, it's kind of not healthy too. So I was like, look, just stay the night. You have keys. You can run and get a shower in the morning and come back or whatever. And they were in here for about 5 minutes until it felt like somebody was driving a needle into their leg, and just, decided it was better to sleep in a 40-degree house.
And obviously something like that must have shook him up for him to be like, yeah, I'm leaving.
Yeah, pretty much. Like, there's air conditioning in here. Why would you forego that to go sleep in the sweltering heat? Yeah.
I guess they're not used to it, like most of us are who were in this field or believe in it. They kind of like, something's
that person
attack me. And
did not believe in ghosts.
Yeah.
And then hearing them justify it later was interesting. I don't remember what the line of reasoning was, but I was like, okay.
But they were kind of giving you all these scenarios, and then you just stood there. I could just picture you just stood there like, okay.
Yeah, all right. I don't know what happened, so all right, if that's what you think happened. I'm not gonna argue with somebody about their experience.
Yeah.
And I mean, it could have been a bug. There's other things that could have gone on, but I've never seen any evidence of that, and it has not reoccurred.
But the thing is, obviously, you don't know if your shop's haunted or if because when I paranormal investigate, we see it a lot. You don't know if they've got family members following them in spirit or.
Yeah, I don't know enough about the person that used to own the building to say that. His family did come by later and confirmed that he died on premises, and that they sprinkled his cremains all over the shop, which would explain some stuff I've never really been able to mop up off the floor. So ash always stays. Don't sprinkle it on things.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's a nice touch, though, isn't it? To his memory, though, because obviously it's a place where he loved.
Yeah, he loved this place, so it's a nice way to capture that.
So, do you? I don't know if you're obviously allowed to say this, but there's been a question in the chat room. Are you allowed to say how you acquire some of the items, or don't you want to?
Some of it's pickers, some of it's me going out and looking. There's some wholesaling involved. It's not like there's an Oddities mart where you just go and get things. It's a bunch of different sources, some of which I kind of have to keep to myself so that I'm not, somebody doesn't open up a competing shop in my area. Yeah. You're going to have to protect your wholesale sources. I will say I try to, anything that's made out of animals, I try to get as ethically as possible. I'm not running through the alleys at night murdering things to go in a jar or get its bones or whatever. And one of the good things about the U.S. is there's pretty strict wildlife laws, so you kind of can't do that anyways. Though I don't know if any of you guys saw the news story. Apparently somebody's been going around Las Vegas gluing hats onto pigeons, like little cowboy hats.
Yeah, my sister told, I hadn't seen it, and then my sister told me, and I was just like giggled.
Yeah,
which you do.
It happened while the rodeo was in town. So we think it's related. There's a pigeon rescue in town that's pissed. They're like, why? You might be hurting them. And I feel conflicted about it because they're rock doves, which are actually an invasive species to the U.S. I actually think they're introduced from England. We also have your starlings as a pest bird. So, whether they live or die, it's like they're kind of hurting the ecosystem because they're not supposed to be here. But goodness, they are here and they are abundant.
Yeah.
It
was like something to make you laugh because obviously we went to Nevada. We didn't really see any in Vegas, but when we went up to like Tuna Park, we were like, "What? You have pigeons?" We thought they were only in England.
Yeah. There's people make a lot of squab jokes. Because I don't know. There was one that used to live in my trash can that looked like it was born of grease. Like, it looked like, I don't know, like it was where rabies came from. It was just gross.
Nice. That's all I can say is nice.
Yeah. It doesn't ever. He would have been easy to fry. He was pre-greased.
I don't like him.
Yeah, they're kind of annoying. The little songbirds are cool, and like I said, they're inhibiting their ability to do well by eating, taking up the competing food amounts. Which, out in the desert, it's very hard for things to stay alive.
Yeah, because it's just
this
so
is also
hot there, isn't it? So
yeah, it's so hot. There's not. Vegas has actually like natural springs and water sources, but they're not as abundant as other places, and we get an average of 3 inches of rain a year. And it doesn't so much rain as it does come a flood, and then you just deal with that. Yeah. Paranormal-wise, it's kind of a weird town because Vegas was actually founded by the Latter-day Saints or the Mormons. There's the 50 founding families that stayed behind. The bulk of the Mormons that got here kind of turned around and went back to Salt Lake City because it's kind of hard to get through the Mojave Desert.
well,
exterior,
sorry, you cut out.
or at least as far as the strip goes.
Sorry, Vanessa, you cut out a minute. You cut out then. Could you repeat it? What you were saying?
Okay.
Sorry.
Where did I get cut off?
You were on about the when the just a bit. You got cut off on this when you were on about Salt Lake City bit.
Okay, so the Mormons that stayed are the 50 founding families, and they own a lot of Vegas, as do the casinos. And the casinos have a vested interest in at least keeping the Strip polished and pretty, and, with this, like, Vegas, adult Disneyland persona. The Strip doesn't really care about anything outside of the Strip. And the Mormons tend to live in the, like, wealthier areas, and they're interested in keeping that very, like, wholesome and nice and pretty. And they're part of why, like, the stripper bars here, you can't do full nude anymore. There's only one that has a grandfathered in license in town. The Strip is also interested in burying down bad news stories that might affect tourism. So things like hauntings and violent crime and ghost stuff that might hurt tourism tends to either be reported long after it happens or just not ever get reported. And this includes things like the, far-flung pieces of Vegas that are starting to get developed. Every now and then they find one of those old mob bodies where, Jimmy the Stool was shot, buried out in the middle of the desert, and now, that's a housing complex. And every now and then that pops up in the news. I don't know that anybody really investigates those sites, because once again, they're kind of hard to find because it's in the city's best interest to not have them publicly known about. But Vegas does have a really strong history of violent crime and criminal activity because the mafia, this was nothing until Bugsy Siegel came out here and started his casinos and started up the Strip. And you hear the old timers say that old Vegas, while you had to be a little afraid of the mob, like they would take care of their guests and really make sure that people had a good time and what vices you wanted were delivered in like a controlled manner. Whereas now the corporations are less vested in that. They really do want you to come in and gamble, but aside from that, they're not as interested. Yeah.
We've had the question in the chat room. You'll probably be, you should be able to answer this because obviously you live in Vegas. Kerry says, she's put, if you think about it, we always link paranormal activity to water, but in Vegas that doesn't really hold true. Is there a huge water reserve underground in Vegas that you know of?
A huge what underground?
Water reserve.
So that's a weird question. Vegas actually basically has a subterranean city, at least under the Strip, and they're giant runoff tunnels for when it does rain because, like I said, we get a day of like flooding and then it doesn't rain for like 8 months. And there's actually a whole network of people that live under there. They live in houses they build themselves on stilts, and I'm using the word house very liberally here. Shack is probably a better example. And like if you or I tried to access these tunnels and we weren't invited by somebody that lives down there or know someone down there or weren't part of the like city services they know and trust, you're very quickly pushed out. To my knowledge, there is not a huge body of water in those tunnels that's standing. There is supposed to be an aquifer beneath that if it were tapped would actually cause Vegas to collapse. So that's very deep though. And the tunnels that drain off into the Colorado River and Lake Mead being created by Hoover Dam. And that's about 30 minutes from the city. There's also some marshlands and springs and wetlands around the city. One of the oldest structures is Old Mormon Fort, and that's built around a small spring, which comes up from that really deep aquifer.
See, this is why we got you on, because you know your stuff. I would have never known this.
Yeah, and it's weird what you glean. I've only lived here a couple of years, but the things you find out, well, knowing how the water got to the city was a concern for me if I was going to live here a long time.
Yeah.
Because Lake Mead is actually at a historical low. Which is upsetting because it not only provides water to a good bit of Arizona, California, and Mexico, but it also provides power to all of those places. But you gotta love the American infrastructure. We're still dependent on a dam that was built in 1935.
Is that the Hoover?
Yes.
Is it Hoover Dam? Hoover Dam?
Yeah, Hoover Dam. Yeah. It's named after the president at the time. Yeah. That's the same president that had Hoovervilles, which were roaming migrant camps during the Great Depression. And he was replaced by Churchill's buddy, Roosevelt. Roosevelt. Yeah. One of the other cool things that I know a lot of the paranormal people would love to investigate in this town is, have you heard about the bomb shelter house?
Nope.
So some guy in the late 50s, early 60s decided to completely excavate underneath his house, which is hard to do because the bedrock is so high here. It basically involves dynamite. So he built himself a house and a fake backyard and fake trees underneath a faux house for when the nuclear war was going to happen. Of course, it didn't. The house is very close to the Strip. It recently went up for sale for $8 million. But he even has he built a barbecue pit that the smoke would get funneled outside, but the air couldn't come back in. So that's one of the creepy, cool secrets in Las Vegas.
There we go, guys. You got any little Vegas secrets?
all the Vegas secrets. Everybody wants to go to that house. I want to go to that house. Oh my God.
Some Vegas secrets we can say on live on air.
Yeah, and you can Google that, the Vegas bomb shelter house or whatever, and see the photos of what it looks like inside. It's pretty well documented. I know I had somebody point it out when I was driving at one point, where it actually is, and you'd never notice. It's kind of like in Los Angeles. There's the oil derrick building. There's these non-discrete, windowless, usually very narrow buildings that hide the oil derricks that are drilling the oil reserves out from under Los Angeles. That's what makes the La Brea tar pit, if you've ever heard of that. So something fun to look for if you're ever in Los Angeles is the oil derrick buildings.
The question off Carrie again. She says, aren't there ghost stories about Hoover Dam? She's seen them somewhere. Read them online.
There are. You'd be surprised how many people didn't die in the Hoover Dam project. I think it's less than 10 people were sucked into the concrete and are just in the dam. I've heard the engineers report that at night there are some paranormal things that go on, which, if you believe that water funnels it, that's a good place to be haunted. There's I think there's 5 drainage tunnels that feed the turbines that are you could drive a bus through them, one of those big double-decker buses through them easily. You get to stand on top of one of them when you do the dam tour, and you can just feel the water making everything shake.
Wow.
It was an amazing piece of engineering for the time. How they did it's completely insane. A lot of the tunnels where they rerouted the river are still in place, and there's still all of the construction equipment there, so it's kind of unchanging in a way that's very weird. But you can't investigate Hoover Dam. They won't allow that because it's run by the Army Corps of Engineers, which maintains water supply and other crucial infrastructure things, and you would actually need government clearance to do a paranormal investigation there. They actually check the underneaths of your cars and such when you drive into Hoover Dam to make sure you don't have a bomb or something that could injure the dam. Yeah. It's probably one of the most high security areas you could visit.
Yeah, because I'm scared of heights, and I'm you won't get me at Hoover Dam, because it's quite tall as well, isn't it?
It's 700 feet, over 700 feet tall. It is impressive. You stand on that and you feel very tiny. And it's all Art Deco. It's actually, if you've ever played Fallout New Vegas, it is that's a pretty accurate rendering of the dam.
Ooh.
Yeah. So if you want to know a fun fact about me, I actually got married in a Texas ghost town. I didn't have a lot of money to get married with the second time, and I knew about this ghost town, and it was super cheap. They have like a retired Catholic church there dedicated to St. Barbara, the saint of mining, because they used to mine coal and sandstone for paver bricks out of the area, and yeah, it's supposed to have some people that like come to pray in the ghosts come to pray in the old church, and there's it's called Thurber, Texas, Thurber. And there's a cemetery. One of the graves is really spooky because a guy knew he was dying, so he dug his own grave, lined it with bricks, put the suit he wanted to be buried in, made his own cross, and then put a vault door on it so he could leave when he wanted to. And the cemetery, what destroyed the town was a. Oh yeah, isn't that creepy?
Yeah.
What destroyed the town was the Spanish flu, the oil fields opening up, and the people just wanted to get away. It was a company script town. I don't know if y'all really know what that is, but it's a ugly piece of American history. They'd basically, if you worked in a company script town, you'd get paid in their made-up currency that was good nowhere else. And the only place you could buy food and supplies from was a general store owned by the company. And the prices inside would be astronomically high, so that oftentimes to buy your necessities, you would go into debt for the company you worked for so that you actually could never leave. And they could maintain whatever conditions, good or bad, and oftentimes bad, that they wanted. It was really common in coal towns as a way to keep the coal workers from ever being able to like leave and seek out better working conditions.
Yeah, that is just. So that, I agree with Kerry. She just put in the Jack room in the chat room. Gosh, that's horrible.
Yeah, the song 16 Tons is actually about that. You know, the line I owe my soul to the company store is about like, you know, never being able to free yourself of that debt. Like I said, one of the good things is that was primarily ended in Texas by the oil fields open up, but there's parts of the U.S. like Tennessee and Kentucky and the Virginias where we mine a lot of our coal, and those people were kept in virtual slavery until probably after the Great Depression.
And Richard says there were similar setups in the industrial towns in the north here in the UK.
I'm not surprised. Northern England or Scotland, probably. I think that people taking advantage of other people and abusing their workers is sadly not an uncommon history.
Mm.
Yeah. But it seems to... I think that the accumulation of sorrow tends to cause paranormal experiences. I don't know if there's any studies to that effect, but you know, that seems to be a common theme among places that are purportedly haunted, is there is sustained suffering for a period of time, or which, you know, I'm going to put death as like something that, you know, massively causes people to suffer. And so I guess the question is, does the land attract that? Do we change the land? Is this something that's a matter of perception? I mean, there's a lot of, you know, psychological, physiological, and philosophical arguments about this. And I don't know. Do you have any thoughts that way, Sam?
Sorry, what did you say, Vanessa?
Like, do you think that places attract the kind of energy that causes paranormal phenomenon, or do you think that the people, in a way, cause that either through their interpretation of reality or through bringing experiences to a place?
See, I don't know, because mine's changed a lot, because obviously I've been investigating now for like over 5 years now, and before I was like, not saying I'm skeptical and I don't believe in the paranormal, but it's kind of like something, like you'll be in your mind, you'll be thinking like, oh, something's going to happen, then something will happen. So then, like, Kerry will probably agree with this, because Kerry's into the psychological and philosophical side, and that's how I don't know to be. But like I say, the more, because I do a lot of research, the more I go into it now, is I do think a lot of stuff is, I'm probably going to get shot for this comment, but I do believe that sometimes that your mind makes you have things happen, if that makes sense.
I mean, I know from having an art degree that there are assumptions we make, at least visually, pretty readily, just as a point of fact of our brain's biology. For example, we are most likely to see faces in patterns that have no, nothing concrete about them, like the fuzz on television screens that used to happen in old TVs when you didn't have a signal. You were more likely to see a face of some sort in that than you are anything else. So people will see that and assume that it's some kind of phenomenon when it is their brain just trying to fill in informations, because we're designed to look for things that could hurt or help us. And our brain doesn't know that there are things that are just neutral and that are not providing information. It's looking for that pattern because there's this animal part of us that is worried about not being able to thrive. And that has to be acknowledged. And things like, rigorous testing protocol and, hypothesis, forms of exploring science has to be applied to the paranormal field if you're going to try to, gain serious insight from your experiences.
And you the more I think about it, with you saying that, where your mind needs kind of thinks that it needs to see things. So that's probably the same concept, or I don't know what you want to call it, when some people are obviously sat in a dark room and you see a figure. So whereas obviously the same with, like you said, with your brain tries to find like figures and that in art, maybe it's the same as when you're sitting in the dark in a haunted location. So your mind's, because you're so used to being in the light.
Humans as an animal are at horrible disadvantage in the darkness. We do not see well in the dark. We don't have the abilities like our pets even do. Like a cat sees way better with very little light than we could even hope to, which is part of why they will hunt in those, twilighty periods. So I feel like the darkness is always going to call upon, like, what we would describe as a primal fear. Our brain is going to be on high alert, and our brain doesn't know the difference between, oh crap, the power went out, I probably just have to sit here for a couple of minutes and it's going to go back on, and I am in a tree in Africa and there may be lions. It's all the same thing to your brain. It's kind of like your brain doesn't know that different stress levels are different based on circumstances. To your brain, running from a lion is the exact same thing as you have a deadline and your boss is going to possibly yell at you.
Yeah.
And Yeah, so. And I think when you look at paranormal phenomenon, you have to be willing to give that explanation for what is going on. You know, did you see a shadow figure, or are you so on edge and have the expectation of seeing one, so you did convince yourself you saw it? Which is part of where cameras and recording equipment is supposed to help us, you know, be better than what our biology dictates. But, you know, that can also be faked. And I always worry about the people you see that consistently get results. Because either they're setting up a situation that can be repeated by other people where you would also get these results, or, you know, what they're producing is always going to be questionable. So the goal here is to get to the point that you can set up X camera in X space under X conditions and, you know, achieve result. And that is where, like, the science community would go, okay, perhaps there is something to this. And it's, you know, and at that point you're going to start to have, like, knowable explanations for what you're encountering. Like, ghosts, if they exist, are a phenomenon that is caused by something. There is a way to understand them if they exist. So the question is, how do you get to the point that you can start to arrive at this explanation? And it seems to be, from what little I understand about, like, advanced physics and you know, the things that we're starting to understand about the universe itself and, like, dimensions and stuff, is there's possible cause for things that exist that we would have formerly called a ghost, but is just something that exists outside of our easy perception. And so, like, how, if we get to the point that we can define that and acknowledge that it exists, how does that change our beliefs about afterlife-related phenomenon? And this isn't even getting into the, like, statistics. Do aliens exist? Because it's not good. It's the statistical chances of it are not good at all. That there is other life. It has advanced to the point that it could arrive here and does so efficiently. According to our knowledge set, like, not favorable. But there are enough people purporting phenomenon that there seems to be something that does occur similar to that, so it's a difficult spot. And I'm not saying, like, I believe in it or I don't believe it, or you should believe in it or you shouldn't believe in it. I'm just saying, like, personally, I would like to see more rigorous exploration of this phenomenon. You know, and some of that's just write down everything you think is pertinent if you're going to go out and investigate, you know?
Yeah. That's what a lot of people tend to do now, though, is, and what I found is that you need to write down everything in detail. So say, like, if something did happen to you, then you need to put where, what, like, weather conditions, in what type of building you're in, if that makes sense.
Yeah, like, what's the moon phase? How's the weather? Because, you know, if you look at it, so if this phenomenon has existed over a substantial period of time, there's the question of how did people interpret it before we had scientific measures. And so words like ghosts and spirits and demons and angels and gods and goddesses come up. And so you look at how and when did the older people that existed before us talk to them, and I think you start to find like patterns that occur, like it has to do with the season, or it has to do with the time of day, or it has to do with some kind of celestial event, and maybe that was just them poking at the dark, hoping to make sense of something that seems relatively senseless. But if enough cultures arrive at, oh, well, this tends to happen at X time, perhaps that's worth exploring. Like, I would love to see paranormal studies where they go to a purportedly haunted location and run a series of, like, camera tests and questions at, like, a certain time of the month, and then repeat it later in the month, and then repeat it later in the month, and then repeat it later in the month, and then go back and try to reproduce those same conditions the next month and see if patterns start to emerge. But gosh, who has that much free time? Ha ha.
Few comments in the chat room I'll pass on to you. Kerry says it all.
Why does she sound like Ray Romano as a girl?
No. she's like just saying it's like people's belief systems, and what's the other one? It's an externalization of an internal process. And this is a question to you, Vanessa, because obviously I know you do art, and that Richard says, with a background in art, does Vanessa think that more creative people are more I can't even say
susceptible?
Yes, to paranormal activity.
I think the answer here is not susceptible. I think that it is willing to accommodate the idea. And I think that has to do with the nature of the mind that pursues more humanities-related professions. And it's that to succeed in those, you have to be open to experience. And, if you have a master's degree, you have a rudimentary understanding of philosophy if it's in studio art, because that plays so much into how at least visual art progresses and changes with time. And I feel like that makes you a little more open to, like, well, there is the idea that this could exist. When, once again, we talk about the biology of our brains, we have to acknowledge that the human brain also works very well as a filter. And it works as a filter to determine what information it's receiving is important to, one, keep us alive, two, keep us fed, and three, propagate the species. So if we're somebody that likes just the facts, ma'am, if we're somebody that perhaps doesn't enjoy the nature of change, or experiences outside of their comfort zone, then their brain is going to be trying to filter the external information that plays against the things that make them comfortable. So if they encounter a ghost, they're more likely to be like, oh, well, you know what? No, that just didn't happen. Or there's a logical explanation for that. I have been drinking. Clearly, I did not get enough sleep last night. So I don't think it's going to register to them. Whereas somebody who has welcomed and tried to covet unique experiences and even compose them themselves, I think they're going to be more likely to jump to the, like, fantastical conclusion, if that makes sense. Mm. And I think it's like, if you've ever experienced death, you kind of know how this is, because my first husband died 1.5 years after we got divorced, and I went into complete denial. No, you're talking about another 29-year-old redheaded man named Patrick who's in the photo department and has muscular dystrophy. Surely it can't be this person. There must be two of them. Mm. And then it sunk in that, like, that's impossible, Vanessa, stop it. And, if you think about that, like, if something really bizarre happens to you, that defense mechanism is still there to, just gloss it over with something easy. Well, that was a weird light reflection around the corner, And it's not to say that it wasn't a weird light reflection around the corner, but yeah. Like if my Southern Baptist grandmother saw like a shadow person, she would just assume it's a devil. If I saw one, I'd be like, oh, that's a shadow person. If like Frank the accountant came in here, perhaps he'd just try to understand like mathematically what happened. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't think accountants are really like that. I think they just add. They're not physicists. I should have said physicist. Whoops.
I'm sure everyone gets what you're on about, so you're all right.
Yeah. And that's once again where things like cameras and recording equipment come in handy. They, unless they're tampered with, just record the facts, ma'am. And you could even look at the information that's come out about how reliable people's memories are, and it's that they're not. We are not good at remembering things the way they are. We're good at applying our filter to them and seeing them the way that we want to see them. And that's not bad or good. That's just simply how it is. And, it's... I think that applies to this once again, because once again, if you want to see a ghost, you're going to see a ghost. A hammer sees a nail.
Mm. I think that's the same, obviously. What you're saying is because it's the same concept. Sometimes if people going to investigate the paranormal, it's like what I've found is that some people, because their belief system is, it's not real, so nothing will happen. And I'm not saying that stuff will happen all the time, but something like you were saying earlier, and people have been saying in the chat room, it's all obviously your mind and how your mind can play tricks on you and things like that.
I mean, and yeah, your mind very realistically can play tricks on you. And there could even be an argument that there's something to biological material that makes it to where we can see things that cameras can't. But this starts to get into the really heavily debated philosophical questions of, well, what is real?
Mm.
What is real? How does your perception change or influence reality? Is what's real to me the same as what's real to you? And there is your answer, but there's no good answer.
Mm.
I mean, just having color blindness, like, I don't have color blindness, but if I did, my version of reality is going to be very different from everybody who doesn't have it. If my mom had drank a whole lot when I was a baby, fetal alcohol syndrome would have some effects on my brain that would shape how I see reality. I'm dyslexic. I just sometimes don't spit things out the way that they went into my brain hole.
Yeah.
And that's my reality. So it's, which is why I always hesitate to say, no, you didn't see that to people, because, well, apparently they did. They're saying they did. There's no point in dismissing that. It's whether or not it's provable.
Mm.
And you have to have a certain amount of humble pie with it and be willing to say, well, you know what? I can't prove it. Like, I used to work with a paranormal investigation group in Texas when I was in my early 20s, a long time ago. And I once got a really cool piece of evidence, which unfortunately showed up in a car window.
Mm.
Which that can never be a legitimate piece of evidence. It looked like a face, like it was very creepy. But you'll never be able to argue that wasn't just a reflection.
Mm.
Yeah. And, you know, you're always going to have the people arguing that orbs are either insects or dust motes, which they can very well be. It's that's probably one of the most difficult pieces of paranormal occurrences. But you kind of have to be realistic and look for the better evidence, look for the better thing, look for the consistent thing, the thing that can be tested, you know?
Yeah.
Yep.
So we have a few minutes left of the show already. You know, this hour. Oh, it goes quick. So just a quick one. I know. So just a quick one. If any listeners are in Las Vegas, or if anyone is taking a trip to Las Vegas before you obviously close later this month, do you have anything coming up?
Next Tuesday we're making a wish spell Yule fire pine cone thing. It's really cool. You write wishes on little papers, tuck them into the pine cone, dip it in wax, sprinkle herbs on it, and then it's like a fire starter for your Yule fire, and it manifests your wishes out into the air. So that'll be Tuesday the 17th from 5 p.m. till people leave.
Till people leave.
I usually start kicking people out around 10 p.m. because then I'm getting tired and cranky. Yeah. So that'll be fun. I'm going to get like a snack tray. People like cheese, right? Cheese is a good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to close December 23rd, pack, try to move it. I'm supposed to be out by January 1st. Yikes. Guess what I'm doing for Christmas? Packing the store. That's the answer. I'm packing the store. That's packing. I'm packing for Christmas. Anyways, I'm hoping the first week of January we can at least rudimentarily get the new space running, and I'll announce a grand opening. When we get there, our social media tag is Odd Las Vegas on at least Facebook and Instagram, Odd Las Vegas.
Yeah. And if anybody knows, you are running a bit of a GoFundMe page, aren't you, for your move?
Yeah, if anybody wants to chip in to help with any of the deposits or anything, I had some people request it, so I threw one up. I think it's Help Las Vegas Oddities Move on GoFundMe.
I've shared the link
no
in
pressure.
the chat room anyway for you, so if anyone wants to.
I would plug our webpage, but I don't ship to England, especially animal products, because I don't know what's legal over there. Yeah. I don't want some creepy British inspector coming and giving me a spanking. Or do I? Or do I?
I don't know.
Yeah, you know, like the scariest thing on earth, little British girls talking about dead stuff. Look, Mummy, it's a dead canary. You're like, oh God, why? I told that we had a British couple came in and their daughter was like 6, and I'm like, hey, if you're bored on this trip, she's like, yeah, and I'm like, your accent is scary, so just be like, I see a paraghost, and people will be like, oh shit. Is that a zombie? No.
Like that creepy ass
like,
children.
I hope you know she's gonna do this. And I'm like, good. Las Vegas Oddities, helping children all over the world become even creepier.
Next, I can just expect you now with a child mannequin making it look all creepy in your new shop now.
Yeah, there you go.
That's an idea for it.
Timmy.
Anyway, with that said, it's come up to the hour. So I want to obviously thank you, Vanessa, for coming on. It was great to finally speak to you, although it's on Skype and not in person.
Indeed. Thank you for having me.
No problem.
And thanks everybody for the fun questions.
Yeah. And obviously, before we say as usual good night, guys, I want to thank Richard and Kerry in the chat room who have been keeping the chat room active, and anybody who has listened. You know the score. If you've listened to it before, you can just go back on the speaker app and you'll find all the previous shows on all the different days. And it's a good night from, well, shall I say good night or good afternoon? Because it's like evening for you. Afternoon for you.
It is 2 p.m. here, but I appreciate the well wishes nonetheless. And lovely night to you, dear.
And it's a good night for me, guys.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to join us for more shows throughout the week. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, and the World Wide Web to keep up to date with all the shows right here on Parasearch Radio.